The city of Aloria floated under two suns, shining with towers of glass and silver, a place where machines hummed and airships drifted above the streets. Crowds moved like rivers, merchants shouted, and strange animals pulled carts of glowing fruit. But in the middle of all this beauty, a sudden cry broke the calm. A young girl had fallen near the grand fountain, her body shaking, her breath short and painful. People stopped and stared. Whispers filled the air. No one dared to come close. Her small hands clutched her chest, her eyes wide with fear. She cannot breathe, someone said. Yet no one stepped forward. The people of Aloria were afraid of sickness, afraid of touching a child in crisis, afraid of blame if things went wrong. They only watched, their fear louder than their pity. The girl's face grew pale, her lips turning blue. The crowd murmured but still held back. Her cries turned weaker, her tiny frame trembling like a candle in wind. Then from the edge of the plaza, a stranger walked into the circle of silence. He looked different from the citizens, his clothes simple, his boots dusty from travel, his eyes calm but sharp. He was human, not from this world. He was only a traveler passing through, but in that moment he became the center of every gaze. He knelt beside the girl without asking permission, his shadow covering her small face. People gasped, some whispered, "Foolish human. He will be blamed if she dies." Others shook their heads. Already sure he would fail, the stranger did not care. He did not reach for medicine. He did not use a machine. Instead, he pulled a small toy from his pocket, a simple glass tube with liquid inside. He dipped a ring and blew. Soft bubbles floated into the air. Glowing under the twin suns, drifting like tiny moons, they sparkled and spun. The girl blinked at them, her eyes following the colors, her breathing still weak but slowing. Her trembling hands reached toward the bubbles. The crowd murmured louder, some laughed, thinking it foolish. Others frowned, thinking it disrespectful. But the stranger kept blowing. One bubble, then another, sending them above her face, letting them fall gently near her, letting her forget her fear for a moment. The girl's breaths grew longer, her panic fading as she watched the bubbles dance. Her body stopped shaking so much, her eyes grew wet with tears. But they were no longer only tears of fear, they were tears of wonder. The stranger spoke softly, his voice calm. "Breathe, little one. Watch the bubbles, let them float, let them fall." His words were simple, but steady like a song. The crowd fell silent, eyes locked on the strange scene. No one had expected this, no one understood why it worked. Yet they could see with their own eyes that the girl was calming, and in that silence another gaze watched, a gaze far more powerful than all others. High above, hidden behind the crystal balcony of the palace tower, a figure stood cloaked in shadow and gold. The Queen of Aloria, the ruler of the city, the mother of the girl. Her eyes were sharp as ice, her heart burning with fear. For she had seen her daughter collapse and had been ready to summon guards and healers. But now she stood frozen, watching the strange human calm her child with nothing but bubbles. The queen's mind raced. Who was this man? Why did he act so boldly? And how could such a simple thing begin to save her daughter when all her healers, all her machines, and all her power might not have done the same? The stranger still did not know. He kept blowing bubbles, leaning closer, his voice low, steady, soothing. "You are safe, breathe. Follow the bubbles," he repeated, his hands gentle, his face calm. He was only focused on the girl, unaware of the weight of the eyes above him. The girl's chest rose slowly, her breathing stronger, her trembling less. She reached for a bubble, her small hand catching it before it burst. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. The crowd's shock turned into awe. Whispers changed into silence. People began to realize they were watching something more than chance, something human, something old, something beyond their science and rules. The stranger finally looked up, his eyes sweeping the circle of faces. But he saw only fear and confusion, not gratitude, not welcome. He knew he was still an outsider here. His act of kindness might bring danger. Not thanks, and still unknown to him above the plaza. The queen leaned forward, her hand clutching the balcony rail, her eyes full of questions. Her heart divided between anger at his daring and wonder at his courage. For in that moment the human traveler had done what no one else dared. He had reached across fear with something simple, something pure. He had soothed a child in crisis, and unknowingly he had touched the heart of a queen. The suns burned brighter overhead, the bubbles drifted higher, and the air itself seemed to pause. The story of Aloria had just begun, and the stranger had already stepped into destiny without knowing it. The girl lay near the fountain, her breathing steady now, her eyes half closed but calm, her small hands still chasing the last bubbles floating in the sunlight. The crowd around her whispered in low voices, unsure whether to be relieved or afraid. The stranger still knelt beside her, his face calm but serious, his hand holding the simple bubble toy. A strange thing in such a grand city of machines and glowing towers, yet it had worked. It had turned fear into peace. But while the people watched from the ground, another pair of eyes burned above them all. The Queen of Aloria stood on her balcony, her cloak heavy with gems, her crown shining in the light of two suns. Yet her eyes were fixed only on her daughter below. The Queen's heart raced, her power ruled the city. Her voice commanded armies, her machines could heal and her ships could destroy. Yet in that moment she felt powerless. For no machine, no soldier, no healer had saved her daughter. It had been a human stranger with nothing but bubbles. "Who is he?" she whispered under her breath, her guards standing nearby but silent. They too had seen the act. They too felt the strangeness of it. The Queen raised her hand, a signal for her watchers. Hidden eyes in the shadows of the city. Spies and servants trained to see everything. Already they moved through the crowd. Blending like smoke, they would follow this stranger, learn his name, his past, his reason for being here below. The stranger helped the girl sit up. He spoke softly to her. "It is all right now. You are safe." His voice gentle, his manner calm. The girl smiled weakly, still reaching toward the sky where a single bubble floated higher and higher, until it vanished into the sunlight. The crowd began to step back, their whispers turning into silence. Some bowed their heads, unsure whether to thank the stranger or avoid him. For in Aloria, outsiders were often distrusted, and a man who touched the royal child without permission would be remembered. The stranger looked around. He could feel the tension. He could feel eyes on him, not just from the crowd but from somewhere higher, heavier, sharper. He lifted the girl carefully, placing her on the steps of the fountain where she could rest. He wanted to slip away, to disappear into the streets before questions came. But it was already too late. Guards in silver armor pushed through the crowd, their long spears gleaming, their helmets covering their faces. They surrounded the fountain in a ring of steel. The people stepped back quickly. Afraid, silent, watching, the stranger rose slowly, his hands still open, showing no threat. His bubble toy hanging loosely in his fingers, the captain of the guard spoke. His voice loud, echoing, "By order of the Queen, you will come with us." The words cut through the air like a blade. The stranger tilted his head slightly, his voice calm. She needed help. I only gave it, but his words did not soften the captain's face. The guards did not lower their spears. The girl's voice broke the silence. Weak but clear. "He saved me," she said, her small hand pointing at the stranger, her eyes full of gratitude. But the captain only bowed his head slightly, as if her words did not change the command of the Queen. The crowd stirred, some angry, some afraid, but none dared to challenge the will of the palace. They watched in silence as the guard stepped closer. The stranger felt the cold weight of choice. He could fight and be crushed, he could run and be hunted, or he could follow and see what fate waited in the palace above. His eyes lifted for a brief moment to the shining balcony, but he saw no one. The Queen had already stepped back into the shadows. Still he felt her presence like a storm in the distance, silent but heavy. He knew he had been seen, judged and marked. He let the guards take him, his hand still calm, his voice silent, the bubble toy slipping back into his pocket. The girl called out once more, "Do not hurt him," her small voice trembling. But the guards only bowed and led the stranger away. The crowd parted, whispers chasing after him like shadows. Up in the palace, the Queen turned from the balcony, her face unreadable, her mind full of questions. Was this man a simple traveler or something more? Why did his small act touch her daughter's heart? And why did it disturb her own so deeply? She spoke to her chief advisor, a man old and wise. "Watch him," she said, her voice cold but quiet. "Do not let him leave this city without my knowing." The advisor bowed, but his eyes carried doubt. He too had seen something in the stranger's calmness, something rare, something dangerous. The Queen walked deeper into the palace, her cloak trailing, her mind restless. She was ruler of 1,000 machines. Yet a single bubble had shaken her throne below in the golden halls of the palace. The stranger was led inside, the doors closing behind him. The crowd left outside wondering. The girl still sitting by the fountain, whispering softly to herself. "He saved me," her words lost in the wind. The suns drifted lower, shadows stretched across Aloria. The city buzzed with whispers of the human traveler, Some called him a fool, some called him brave, but all knew one thing. His path was now tied to the queen, though he did not yet understand it. And so the stranger's steps echoed inside the palace of glass and stone, under the hidden eyes of the queen, destiny waiting for him in halls where secrets lived. The palace of Aloria stood like a mountain of crystal, its towers glowing under the twin suns, its halls filled with echoes of power. Soldiers marched in silence, servants bowed their heads, and high above, the queen's banners drifted like silver fire. Through the tall gates of gold the stranger was led, his steps heavy on the shining floor. Guards surrounded him, their spears close, their faces hidden. The crowd outside was gone. Only whispers remained, whispers that followed him into the palace walls. The stranger kept his calm, his eyes moving over the beauty of the halls. The walls carved with stars, the ceilings painted with battles of old. Every stone seemed alive, glowing faintly with energy, yet to him it felt less like wonder and more like a cage. He was taken to a chamber of stone and glass, a place where the air was cool. Where guards stood in silence, the door closed behind him, and the sound of the city vanished. The chamber had no chains, no fire, no tools of pain, yet it was still a prison, a place meant to hold and watch. In the corner a small crystal eye glowed, pulsing softly. He knew it was no decoration. It was watching him. He sat on the stone bench, his hands on his knees, his mind quiet but his heart alert. He had walked into the queen's palace without choice, and he knew choice would matter less and less now. Far above, the queen sat in her throne room, her eyes sharp, her face calm. Beside her stood her advisor, old and tall, his beard white, his staff heavy with jewels. He leaned close to her and whispered, "He is not like the others, my queen. There is something in him." The queen did not answer at once, her gaze fixed on the city below through the wide glass window. She saw the fountain still shining. She saw her daughter still resting there with servants near her, the memory of the bubbles still clear in her mind. Finally she spoke, her voice low but firm. "I felt it too, but feeling is not truth. We will test him." The advisor bowed his head, yet he kept whispering, "A man who calms with such a simple thing may carry more power than those who wield machines." The queen's eyes narrowed. She remembered her daughter's smile. She remembered her own heart trembling, and it made her uneasy, for a ruler's heart should not be shaken so easily. In the chamber below, the stranger stood. He paced slowly, his eyes on the glowing crystal eye. He spoke softly, not to himself but to whoever watched. "You fear me, though I carry nothing but air in a ring." His voice calm, steady, yet edged with quiet strength. The crystal pulsed brighter as if reacting. Somewhere unseen, a scribe wrote down every word. Somewhere deeper, a spy leaned closer to listen. The queen rose from her throne, her cloak trailing. "Bring him to me," she ordered, her voice cold as steel. Yet inside her chest her heart beat faster. The guards obeyed. The stranger was taken again through halls of crystal, past statues of kings, past walls glowing with blue light, until at last he stood before the great doors of the throne room. The doors opened with a thunderous sound, and he stepped inside. The throne room was vast, pillars of glass reaching like trees, banners of silver and white hanging high. At the far end the queen sat, her crown shining, her eyes like fire. The guards forced him to kneel, but he did not bow his head. His eyes rose to meet hers, calm, unshaken, the air between them thick with silence. The queen studied him, her gaze sharp, her lips still. Behind her the advisor whispered again, "See his eyes, my queen. He does not fear." The queen leaned forward slightly, her voice carrying across the hall. "You touched my daughter." The words cut like a blade, every guard stiffened. The stranger's voice was calm. She was in pain. "I soothed her." The queen's hand tightened on the arm of her throne, her voice sharper. "You think a toy gives you the right to touch a child of the crown?" The stranger's reply came simple. "No right, only need. A child does not care for crowns when she cannot breathe." The throne room grew colder. The guards shifted uneasily. The advisor lowered his eyes. The queen's heart pounded, her anger strong. Yet his words struck something deeper, something she could not ignore. She stood, her cloak flowing, her crown burning with light, her voice powerful. "You will not leave this palace until I know who you are, what you are, and why fate chose you to stand by my daughter." The stranger's calm did not break, his voice low. "I am only a traveler. Nothing more." But in the silence that followed, even he knew it was not the whole truth. From the shadows of the hall, hidden eyes whispered, scribes wrote, spies listened, every word etched into the memory of the palace. And above them all, the queen stood tall. Yet in her heart a storm raged. For the man before her was not a hero, not a soldier, not a lord, but something far stranger. A traveler who blew bubbles and dared to stand before a queen without fear. The sun sank lower beyond the crystal towers. Shadows spread like fire across Eloria. And in the throne room of the queen, the game between power and simplicity had only just begun. The throne room of Eloria stood in silence. The queen watching the human traveler with eyes sharp as glass. The guards waiting for her command. The advisors whispering in the shadows, yet no sound seemed louder than the beating of her heart. The stranger did not kneel in fear. He knelt only because the guards had pressed him down. His back straight, his eyes steady. He looked at the queen not as a servant, but as a man who had nothing to hide. The queen's voice cut the silence. Strong and clear. You say you are only a traveler, yet fate placed you beside my daughter when she cried for life. Such things are not chance, they are tests. And so you will face mine. A murmur passed through the hall. The advisors leaned closer. The guards glanced at each other. None dared to question. The queen's word was law, and when she spoke of a test, it meant danger. The queen raised her hand, her fingers glowing with the light of a crystal ring. The floor beneath the stranger shifted, a circle of stone sliding away, revealing a chamber below filled with blue fire, the air thick with humming energy. This is the Chamber of Echoes, the queen declared, her voice echoing off the crystal walls. A place where lies are broken, where truth is forced into light. If you are what you claim, you will stand unharmed, but if you are not, the chamber will tear the truth from you. The guards pulled the stranger to his feet. They led him to the circle, the fire below flickering like a living sea, the crowd of nobles and scribes watching with wide eyes, eager to see what the chamber would reveal. The stranger did not resist, his steps calm, his face still steady. Though his heart felt the weight of eyes and power pressing down on him, he walked into the circle. The floor closed behind him, and he stood alone in the light of blue fire. The chamber awakened, the flames rising, the air heavy with sound like whispers from 1,000 voices. The crystals on the walls glowed brighter, reflecting his face again and again until it seemed the whole room was filled with copies of him. Speak your name, the queen commanded from her throne above. The stranger's voice was calm. I am Kale. The sound echoed, repeated by the flames, each echo bending, twisting, until it returned pure. The fire did not rise higher. The chamber did not reject him. Speak your purpose, the queen ordered. Her eyes unblinking, Kale lifted his head, his voice steady. I travel the stars to see, to learn, to walk where others will not. The flames hissed. The echoes repeated. His words grew louder, then softer, but they did not break. The chamber seemed to accept them. The queen's eyes narrowed, her voice colder. And why did you touch my daughter? Kale's gaze did not falter. Because she was afraid, because she was in pain, because no one else moved. The words struck through the chamber. The echoes returned stronger, not weaker. The flames rose higher, but not in anger, in recognition. The nobles gasped. The advisors whispered, one muttered. The chamber believes him, another hissed. No chamber believes. It only reveals. The queen's heart tightened. She wanted the chamber to burn him, to reveal some hidden plot, but all it showed was calm. The simple truth of a man who acted without fear. Still, she was not satisfied. She raised her hand, the flames changed color, red fire burning with heat. One last question, she said, her voice heavy with command. What do you seek in my world? In Eloria. The chamber shook, the echoes roared. Kale closed his eyes for a breath, then spoke. I seek nothing but the road ahead. Yet if fate ties me here, I will not run. The chamber screamed, the fire twisted. The echoes crashed like thunder. The crowd stepped back in fear. Yet Kale did not move. He stood steady, his body surrounded by light. His words repeated again and again until at last the chamber grew quiet. The flames lowered. The crystals dimmed. Silence filled the throne room. The queen sat frozen, her hands tight on the arms of her throne, her eyes locked on Kale, the man who had stood inside the chamber of echoes and left unharmed. Her advisor bent close, whispering, The chamber found no lie. He is what he says. The queen's voice was low, sharp as a blade. No man is only what he says. There is always more. Yet her eyes betrayed something else, a spark of unease, a spark of respect. The guards opened the circle. Kale stepped out, his body calm, his eyes steady, the fire behind him fading into nothing. The nobles whispered louder now, some calling him blessed, some calling him cursed. but none could deny he was different. He was not a liar, he was not weak. Kale looked up at the Queen. His voice even, "I told you I am only a traveler, but now your chamber has said the same." The Queen leaned back in her throne, her heart burning with questions she could not ask, her voice cold. "Then, traveler, you will remain here until I decide what to do with you." Kale bowed his head slightly. Not in fear, but in acceptance. He knew his journey had changed. He knew the Queen's eyes would never leave him now. Outside, the twin suns sank lower, painting the palace in gold and red, and in the silence of the throne room, the Queen of Aloria and the human traveler locked eyes, each knowing their paths were now bound together by truth, fate, and something deeper still. Night came to Aloria, the twin suns slipping below the horizon, the city glowing with blue lanterns and floating lights, the palace itself shining like a star above all. Yet inside the Queen's chamber, shadows ruled. The Queen sat alone at her great table of glass, her crown placed beside her, her cloak set aside, her face no longer the mask of a ruler, but the face of a mother. Her fingers traced the edge of a crystal goblet, her mind heavy with thoughts she could not silence. Her daughter slept safely in her bed. Healers watching over her, guards at the door, yet the Queen's heart was restless. She could still see the bubbles, soft and glowing, drifting above her child. She could still hear the stranger's calm voice, soothing like water over stone. Why had no healer acted so quickly? Why had no guard stepped forward? Why had she herself frozen in fear? It was the human who moved, a man of no rank, no crown, no power, and he had done what all her might could not. Her advisor entered the chamber, his staff tapping softly against the stone floor. He bowed low, his voice quiet. "My queen, the traveler rests in the guest wing. Under watch, he has asked for nothing, not even food. He simply sits in silence." The Queen did not raise her eyes, her voice cool. "And what do you think of him?" The advisor hesitated, his beard brushing his chest as he leaned on his staff. "He is calm where others would shake. He is strong where others would fall. Yet I do not think he is dangerous." His truth seemed simple, too simple, and that may be the danger itself. The Queen's lips pressed into a line. Her heart torn. As ruler she must see him as a threat, as mother she must see him as a savior. But she could not be both at once, and this tore at her more than she wished to admit. She rose from her chair, walking to the balcony, the night wind touching her face. Below she saw the city resting, glowing like embers. Far away she saw the fountain where her daughter had collapsed, a place that now felt heavy with meaning. The advisor spoke again. "You could release him, send him from Aloria. Let fate carry him elsewhere." The Queen shook her head slowly, her voice low. "And if fate carried him to our enemies, what then? A man who calms fear with nothing but air may be worth more than armies, no. I cannot let him leave." "Not yet." Her mind burned with questions. Who was Kale truly? What had shaped him to act without hesitation? What power rested in his calm? Was it simply human kindness or something hidden, something older than machines and crowns? In the guest wing, Kale sat in silence, his eyes closed, his hands resting on his knees. He did not fight the guards, he did not demand answers. He only breathed slowly, calmly, listening to the faint hum of the palace around him. He felt the eyes watching through hidden crystals. He felt the whispers behind walls, but he did not care. He had lived under watch before, in other worlds, in other palaces. He knew that rulers feared what they did not control. Yet he also felt something else, a pull, not of chains but of fate. Something tying him to this city, to this queen, to the small girl who had smiled at his bubbles. The Queen left her chamber at last, her steps quiet, her cloak pulled around her. She moved through secret halls where no guard followed. She walked toward the guest wing, her mind telling her not to go, her heart pushing her forward. She stopped outside the chamber where Kale sat. A guard bowed to her. She lifted her hand, and the door opened without sound. Kale opened his eyes. Lifting his head, their gazes met. Calm against fire, silence against storm. For a long moment, neither spoke. The room filled only with the quiet hum of the palace stones. Finally, the Queen spoke, her voice low, not as ruler but as woman. "Why did you not ask for reward or freedom? Or even food?" Kale's answer came steady. "Because I did not act for reward. I acted because a child was afraid. Sometimes that is enough." The Queen's heart tightened. His words simple yet sharp. They cut deeper than flattery or lies. She stepped further inside, her cloak brushing the floor. "Do you know who that child was?" Kale nodded slightly. "I guessed a child guarded so closely. In a city that bows to a single throne, she could only be yours. The queen's breath caught. His calm acceptance disarmed her. She searched for deceit but found none. She asked again, her voice sharper. And still you touched her? Kale's voice remained soft. Because fear does not wait for permission. The queen turned away, walking to the window, her hands gripping the frame, her mind a storm. His words echoed inside her. They were dangerous, too honest, too pure. The kind of words that could shake a crown if spoken too often. She whispered to herself, but he heard. What am I to do with you? Kale's answer came without hesitation. Nothing, let me go or keep me, it makes no difference to me. My path continues either way. Her heart trembled, for she knew it was not true. It did make a difference. It mattered to her, to her daughter, to the city that had already begun whispering his name. The queen left the chamber without another word, her cloak trailing, her steps fast, as if she feared her own weakness. Kale watched her go, his eyes calm, yet in his chest he felt the pull tighten. He knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning, and in the halls of Aloria, whispers grew louder. Whispers of the queen's dilemma. Whispers of the human traveler who had faced fire and truth, and who now sat calmly inside the palace of glass. The city waited. The queen wrestled with her heart, and fate turned silently, weaving threads that neither ruler nor traveler could escape. The city of Aloria never truly slept. When the suns fell, the towers glowed brighter, streets lit with silver lamps, airships drifting in silence, and markets still alive with voices. Yet under the glow, shadows moved. Whispers spread quickly, faster than ships, faster than fire. The story of the human traveler had passed from mouth to mouth, from merchant to guard, from servant to noble. They spoke of the bubbles, of the queen's anger, of the chamber of truth. Some called him blessed, some cursed, but all agreed he was no ordinary man. In the guest wing of the palace, Kyle sat quietly, his hands folded, his eyes closed, but even he felt the weight of the city's whispers. For Aloria itself seemed alive, its walls humming with energy, its people watching, its queen thinking of him in silence, yet outside the palace. Others listened too, not all friendly, in the low alleys where the light of the lamps did not reach. Cloaked figures whispered of the traveler, their voices sharp, their plans darker. He shook the queen, one said, his eyes gleaming under the hood. A single act and the city trembles. He must be ours, another hissed. Or he must be destroyed before he becomes more. These were not common thieves. They were the hidden enemies of the crown, rebels who lived in shadow, waiting for weakness. And now they smelled it in the air, back in the palace. The queen walked through her private halls. Her mind restless, she thought of her daughter. Safe but still weak, she thought of Kyle, calm but unbroken. She thought of her throne, steady but shaking in her heart. Her advisor walked beside her, his staff clicking on the crystal floor. My queen, the people speak too loudly. Their faith bends, some say fate sent him. Others say he is danger. If you do nothing, the whispers will grow. The queen's voice was sharp. Then what do you suggest? The advisor lowered his head. Watch him closer. Test him deeper or end this before it begins. The queen's steps slowed, her heart heavy. She could end him with one word, yet something inside her stopped her tongue. She remembered her daughter's smile. She remembered the softness of the bubbles. No, she whispered almost to herself, not yet. In his chamber, Kyle rose at last. He walked to the window. Looking out over the glowing city, he felt eyes still on him. He felt threads of fate pulling. He knew he was no longer just a traveler here. He was a piece in a game he did not choose, and yet in the silence he smiled faintly. For he sensed more than the queen. He sensed the danger waiting in the streets, the movement of shadows, the hunger of rebels far below. Near the fountain where it had begun, a group of cloaked men gathered, their leader tall, his voice low. Tomorrow we strike, we free the stranger, or we take his head, either way. The queen will break. The crowd of rebels nodded, their eyes burning, their blades hidden under cloth, their hearts full of fire, but none of them knew that the queen herself had already moved. In the dark of night she had doubled the guards, hidden watchers placed on every street. For though she did not yet know the rebels' plan, she felt danger creeping. She felt it in her bones, in her chamber. The queen looked at the map of her city, her finger tracing the streets, her voice quiet. They will come for him. I can feel it, the advisor bowed. Then let them come, and let us see where his truth truly lies. The night stretched long. Kale did not sleep. He sat by the window, his eyes on the glowing towers, his mind quiet, But inside his chest a storm of fate turned. He had saved a child, faced a queen, walked through fire, and yet he knew the real test had not begun. He whispered to himself, "The city waits," and indeed it did. For in every street, in every hall, in every heart, Eloria waited, some with hope, some with fear, some with blades. The queen stood alone in her throne room, looking out at her city, her face hard, her heart torn. She whispered, "Traveler, you have stirred my world. Now let us see if you can survive it." The palace lights glowed brighter. The streets whispered louder, and in the shadows, the rebels sharpened their knives. The game was shifting, the storm was near, and Kale, the man who had blown bubbles to save a child, sat in silence, unaware that before the next sun rose, the whole city would test him again, not with fire, not with words, but with blood and shadow. The night air of Eloria was heavy, the twin moons casting silver light across the glass towers. Shadows stretched long, the city glowing but uneasy, for whispers had spread too far, too fast. The human traveler had become more than a man. He had become a story. Kale stood by the window of his chamber. His eyes on the streets below, he felt the movement of shadows, rebels slipping through alleys, guards shifting at corners, the queen's spies hiding in silence, the city itself holding its breath. He did not move, he only waited, for he knew the storm was coming. He had felt storms before on other worlds, but this one carried more than fire and steel. It carried fate. In the throne room, the queen sat in her seat of crystal, her crown heavy, her heart heavier. She had ordered double guards. She had placed spies across the city, yet her mind was restless. She whispered to herself, "If the shadows reach him, what will he do? Run, fight, or stand?" Her advisor stood near, his staff glowing faintly. "My queen, the people will watch. Whatever happens tonight, it will mark his place forever, either as curse or blessing." The queen closed her eyes for a moment. Her daughter's face flashed in her mind, the small smile when the bubbles had floated above her. She whispered, "I will not lose her hope again." Outside, the rebels moved, cloaked, silent, their leader raising a hand. "Tonight we break the queen. We take the stranger, alive or dead. The city will follow us." Their blades caught the moonlight, their eyes burned with anger. But the queen had been right, she had prepared. Hidden guards stepped from shadows, steel clashed, the air filled with the cry of battle. The rebels struck fast, the guards struck back harder. The streets of Eloria burned with sparks of war. In the palace, Kale heard the clash. He did not rush, he did not hide. He only walked to the center of his chamber, standing tall, waiting, for he knew the rebels would come. And they did. The door burst open, 3 men cloaked, their blades sharp, their eyes fierce. "Come with us, traveler. The queen is not your ally. But we can give you freedom." Kale looked at them calmly, his voice steady. "Freedom built on blood is not freedom. It is another chain," the rebels hissed. One lunged forward, but Kale moved faster. He caught the man's wrist, twisted, the blade fell. He did not strike back with death, he only pushed him aside. His calm stronger than fury. The others attacked. But Kale's movements were like water, flowing, turning, soft yet unbreakable. He disarmed without killing. He stood without hate, he fought without rage. The queen arrived at the hall with her guards, her eyes wide. She saw Kale standing among the fallen rebels. None dead, only broken of will, their blades scattered, their breath heavy, her heart shook. She had expected him to flee or to kill, but he had done neither. He had stood and ended the storm without fire. The advisor whispered, "My queen, he is no common man. He could have turned their blades against us. Yet he chose another path." The queen stepped closer, her eyes never leaving Kale. "Why did you not kill them?" Kale's voice was calm. "Because your city already bleeds with fear. More blood will not heal it." The queen's heart trembled, for she knew his words were true. She had ruled with strength, with power, with fear when needed. Yet this man with no throne, no crown, no army, had done what her might could not. He had shown mercy. The rebels were dragged away, their leader glaring at Kale. "This is not the end, human. You will see." But Kale did not answer. He only watched with calm eyes. The queen stood before him, the hall quiet, her guards waiting, her advisor silent. She spoke at last, her voice lower than before. "You came here as traveler, yet you have changed my city. You saved my daughter, you faced my fire, you endured my chamber, and now you have spared my enemies. Tell me, Kale, what are you truly?" Kale's eyes lifted to hers, his voice soft. "I am only human, but sometimes that is enough." The queen's heart softened. Though her face stayed strong, she turned to her guards. "Release him." Her words carried through the hall. The chains of suspicion finally cut. Cale bowed his head slightly, not in servitude but in respect. He turned to leave, but the queen called once more. Her voice firm. "Traveler, your path is yours, yet know this. Aeloria will remember you, and so will I." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. No words, only silence. Yet in that silence was a bond, unspoken but unbreakable. Outside, the suns began to rise again, light spilling over the towers, the city breathing fresh air after the storm. People would wake to whispers of what had happened, whispers of the night the queen and the traveler stood against shadows. Cale stepped into the dawn, his boots echoing on the crystal streets, his path open once more, yet in his heart he carried the memory of a child's smile, a queen's eyes, and a city that would never forget him. And high on her balcony, the queen stood watching, her daughter beside her, her small hand waving at the man below, her voice soft. "Mother, he saved me." The queen's lips curved into the faintest smile. Her whisper carried only to herself. "Yes, child. He saved more than you." The suns rose higher, the bubbles of memory still floating in the queen's mind. And though the traveler walked away, his presence lingered in the heart of Aeloria, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act, as simple as a bubble, could change the fate of a world.